Bezrat Hashem, we start a brand new series now. The brand new series is called the Bond of Emuna. We have all kinds of ideas what our next series would be, but they gauge according to what people want to hear. And lately there have been so many questions, so many private meetings about marital problems and shidduch problems and whatnot. So you see so many people have this problem, those that are married or those that are looking for spouses for the children, looking for shidduchim for the children. Everyone is engaged with one another. Those who are married, they need to improve their marriage. Those who are not married, looking for soulmates. And those who are even happily married, have children, they want to marry off Kol Hashem. So it attains to anyone. And the name of the series is The Bond of Emuna. And tonight, our first is an introduction to the Torah background on marriage called the Mitzvah of Marriage. And it's also some eye-opening information a lot of people don't know. Okay. King David says, all your mitzvot are emunah. He says that in Psalm 119. Okay, we're still going to see what he says. But Reb Avram Saba, that's a Tzur Amor, he was one of the rabbis in the generation of the Spanish Inquisition. He lived from 1440 to 1508. His famous book, and he was a Kabbalist and a Torah scholar. He explained what King David said, Kol mitzvosecha emunah, all your mitzvot are emunah. Sounds kind of cryptic, sounds general. He says that the proper observance of all of Hashem's mitzvot depend on emunah. In other words, if a person doesn't have emunah, he can't properly observe the commandments, the Torah, the mitzvot. Those who don't know, when we say the word mitzvah, it means a commandment. Mitzvot means commandments, and plural. Okay. So in order, that's why we stress emunah. We explain that the mitzvot, when you have commandments, there's 613 commandments in the Torah. And that's, they have a great big check of millions and zillions and trillions. You've got 613 mitzvot on the 613 zeros on your check. If there's not a one on the left side of that check, the check is still zero. So really, the observance of Hashem's commandments is kind of empty if a person doesn't have belief, and a person won't be able to observe it properly because his or her heart won't be in it. Okay, but with belief, with emunah is much deeper than belief. It's a deep cognizance, a belief, a spiritual awareness that we have a creator, a master creator in our lives, that he alone does, and will do everything. Okay, so with this in mind, tell you a story, recent story. There's a progressive, modern Orthodox, whatever you want to call him, a modern guy, learned at college. He thought he knew the Torah pretty well, and he was an observant family, but he became modern, as we say, and he professed to be knowledgeable of Torah. And so he went to one of this generation's greatest rabbis, greatest Sephardi rabbis, Reb Ben Sion Mutzafi in Yerushalayim. Reb Ben Sion Mutzafi, he's one of the greats of this generation. Okay, so he asked Reb Ben Sion Mutzafi if he can move in with his girlfriend. He thought that he looked at the Torah. He says he doesn't see anything that stops him, but there's a commandment that you can't live with your girlfriend. So he went through the Torah. He couldn't find any prohibition on this, and he thought he had the upper hand on Reb Ben Sion Mutzafi. The young man didn't understand. He got to wake up very early in the morning to get the upper hand of Torah on Rabbi Ben Sion Mutzafi. Okay, so he says to the Rabbi Sion Mutzafi, he says, I looked at the whole Torah, went through the whole Torah. Where does the Torah say that a person has to get married in order to live together? Why can't just live together? Ooh. Well, he got an answer. Rabbi Mutzafi answered, just as it's understood that a person can't eat pork and can't eat shellfish and can't eat unkosher meat and he can't eat worms and he's not allowed to violate the Sabbath and he's not allowed to murder, he's not allowed to steal. Okay, this is just as understandable that a couple may not live together without marriage. And he's told the guy, looked him right in the face, says, I don't have to give you reasons, because living together without a bond of marriage, it constitutes multiple violations of Torah every single minute. This is the answer of Rabbi Sion Mutzafi. And he looked him in the face, he says, excuse me, we are not beasts. He says, we're not animals. We're not beasts. Okay, excuse the animals. We don't mean to insult the animals. But so Rabbi Sion Mutzafi said, this young man, he said, a person must live in holiness and in purity and be properly married because many of the Torah's mitzvot depend on this. Okay, you can find this. This is in the questions and answers, Rabbi Ben-Zion Mutzafi. And it says many of Torahs. In other words, there's maybe it doesn't say per se one specific answer. Okay, but what Rabbi Ben-Zion told this young man, many of them mitzvot of Torah. Okay, so I took Rabbi Ben-Zion's answers. Wait a second. All right, the young man wants a deeper explanation. We'll give him a deeper explanation. Okay, so you say if you don't want to say where it says you can't live with your girlfriend. Here it goes, right here. The Torah commands in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 18, there shall be no harlot among the daughters of Israel. And there's a similar prohibition in Leviticus. Okay, in Leviticus, the chapter 19, verse 29, and it says, do not profane your daughter by making her a harlot. In other words, a father, he can't send his daughter or sell her daughter into harlotry and think he can make a living by way of his daughter. No way. That's you can't do that. Not even without money. Okay, a father is not allowed to let a daughter have any type of conjugal relations outside the context of marriage. Otherwise, the father is just transgressing. And we always said daughter is transgressing because when it says she shall not be a harlot among the daughters of Israel, this is a prohibition. The daughters of Israel, hey, wait a second, protect yourself. And you only have one man in your life. And in order to have that one man in your life, he has to take you in betrothal under a wedding canopy, proper wedding, and you have to get married. This is the Torah's commandments. Okay, so we have Rabbi Aaron Halevi was a middle-ever 13th century rabbi, a great rabbi, and he took all the 613 mitzvot of the Torah, and he explained them one by one, elaborate explanations. It's called Sefer Chinuch, the Book of Education. And in the Sefer Chinuch, when he describes these 613 mitzvahs of Torah, he takes the mitzvah, he lists a mitzvah, there is a mitzvah to get married, okay? And the mitzvah, this is mitzvah number 570, and mitzvah number 570 says that one may not have conjugal intimacy without kedubah and kiddushin. Kedubah is a marital contract, and kiddushin is a proper ceremony, betrothal, and holiness. Okay, we therefore see that in our Torah, intimacy outside the context of marriage and sanctitude is none other than lewdness and harlotry. So we're not prudes, but just as we're not prudes, we're not promiscuous. And outside the context, this is promiscuous. And we're not politically correct either. Okay, we say this is what the Torah says, that any type of relations outside the context of marriage is lewdness and harlotry. So words of Torah. Okay, a person not only defiles oneself, but he defiles the ground he walks on. This is especially serious in the land of Israel. People say, well, look, just today, heaven forbid, heaven forbid, heaven forbid, there were two terrible, terrible terrorist hits. And you see, what's the terrorists? The terrorists, where do they get their power from? The terrorists get their power from our transgressions, heaven forbid, heaven forbid. And what the Torah says, and this is what another thing that Rabbi Ben-Zion Mutzafi alluded to, he says the very first mitzvah of the Torah is to be fruitful and multiply. Now, this mitzvah is obligatory, but you can't be fruitful and multiply if you don't take a wife in proper marital ceremony. Okay, so the Torah says that when a person defiles himself or herself, not only does he defile himself, but defiles the land he walks on. So especially in the land of Israel, this is very, very serious. Okay, because this is the Holy Land, and it's very serious. It's like coming in muddy shoes at the carpet in the king's palace. You know, you go muddy shoes out in the cowshed, that's expected, but in the king's palace, that's not expected. All right, so we say, so the very first commandment of Torah is to bring children into the world. And you can't bring children into the world without conjugal relations, but you can't engage in conjugal relations without the bond of marriage. Therefore, marriage is the precondition of raising a family, and it's the only way to avoid violating the Torah every single moment. It's only a few violations. What Rabbi Ben-Zion, what he says, you see, our chachamim, our wise men, what they say in one sentence, people can't even write whole paragraphs and paragraphs. They just took this one sentence answer and said, it's interesting. Interesting. Let's see what Rabbi Ben Sion was telling this young man who thought he knew Torah, but he really didn't know anything. And you start looking at the prohibitions. Wow, one mitzvah after another mitzvah after another mitzvah. Because what the Torah says, so where's the mitzvah that says that you got to get married? Deuteronomy chapter 24. The Torah says when a man takes a wife, what does it mean? As soon as a man desires to marry, the Torah tells getting married, to take a wife. This is like, okay, ki kach ish isha. This is the language of the Torah. Okay, he must do so in a prescribed manner. You just can't grab her and get off and kidnap her. Got to be prescribed. For the man's part, he has to marry by way of a marital contract. And once again, make a betrothal in holiness. It's got to be sanct. And that means ketubah and kiddushin. That means the marital contract. He's got commits himself in writing. Man commits himself in writing to everything. He commits himself to the wife. And because he's just the holy soul, the wife. He's just, people look in modern society. It's not Hollywood. It's not, and people complain, that the woman is a sex object, but people say that Judaism is chauvinistic. The Torah, heaven forbid. The only place in the world where a woman has true rights in the Torah, because a person can't be kidnapped, and she has to have her rights in writing, the marital contract. It's not just the justice of the peace and boom, 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 you're married, rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub, let's have a wedding for you. That's not it. It's to have a whole long thing, and letter by letter, before the marriage ceremony, the rabbis go through it, and exactly what the groom has to commit himself to, when they have the most rights here. So what does the Rambam say? The Rambam says that a person must marry by way of marital contract and betrothal. This is the Rambam. He brings down the Torah and codifies it into law. And for the woman's part, okay, that's man has his obligation, but the woman's part, she may not engage in any type of conjugal relations without the sanctity of ketubah and kiddushin. And the Rambam says that in the beginning of the laws of ishut, that's between men and women, laws of marriage, and in chapter 2. And it's a bad thing what the Torah says for a woman outside the context of the sanctitude of marriage, and she's involved in this. She's considered a harlot. Okay. Let's see about modern society's concept of marriage. If it's a winner or a loser, now that we've become acquainted with the mitzvah of marriage, what the Torah says about marriage. Okay, let's examine what a happy marriage is. Okay. Remember, I used to be on a high school wrestling team. There was a sign up on the ceiling, and it said, if you can read this sign, you're losing. If you could read the sign, it meant you're on your back. And collegiate wrestling and scholastic wrestling, high school and college, if you're on your back for 2 seconds, that's it. You lost the match. Okay. So you can only read that sign if you're on your back. And 2 seconds means they're raising the other guy's hand. He won the match. You lost. Okay. So in real life, what's a victory in marriage? A happy marriage. When you're happily married, that's a victory. Okay. An unhappy marriage means that you're losing in life. Your marriage is losing. And if you're down, even if you're not divorced and you're down, you're unhappy, you better get up fast. Okay. Because a divorce means that you lost the match. So a champion team, let's look in the football league or whatnot, if Coventry or Manchester United, for them to make money and have a lot of fans come to the stadium every week, they've got to have a winning team. And the more they have a winning team, the more money they'll make, more people want to see them. And they'll be televised and they'll make money in advertising. So winning teams make money and losing teams, they don't make money. The same thing in the States, whether baseball, football, basketball. That's why everybody wants to have a winning team. Anybody tries to win team, okay? So a winner wins most of its games, a losing team loses most of its games, and a lackluster team is like half and half in the middle of the league. They win some, they lose some, more or less even, but they're far away from championships, and people aren't enthused by lackluster teams. There's lackluster marriages. Lackluster marriages like the peace treaty between Israel and Jordan. Okay, nobody's firing on the border, and people are respecting, but it's not hunky-dory. It's not the best friends. It's not the U.S. and Canada. It's non-belligerence. Okay, non-belligerence. A lot of people are married and they don't have happiness, but they're non-belligerent. Okay, they don't yell at each other, throw things at each other, but they're not particularly happy and they're not smiling at each other and not spending time with each other. Okay, that's a lackluster marriage, just like you have a lackluster football team. Okay, so let's look at examine ourselves, and we take stock in ourselves. We ask ourselves, am I a winner or a loser? And if a person's not yet married, stop and think. You would get married. We bless you that you find a soulmate, but I want a winning marriage. I don't want to get married to have a losing marriage or a lackluster marriage. A lot of time it's much better to be lonely and alone and not have headache than have a headache inside a marriage. Okay, so let's continue our win-loss metaphor. And we would say, let's see what marriage in contemporary Western society is. Is it a winner or is it a loser? So to answer that question, I looked for a good source on the website, on the web. There's a lot of information out there. Anybody could check me up on that. And I found this prominent law firm, a family law firm in California, and the name is Wilkinson and Finkbeiner. Now, what caught my eyes is they have a whole staff of legal assistants. They're very thorough. And these legal assistants gathered and collated divorce statistics from over 115 studies and facts and rates for over 3 years, 2019, 2020, and 2021. And did fresh out of the oven because they just finished it, around the end of 2022. But it took them a while to collate all this stuff. Okay, here's what they write. I quote. Okay, you can check they have a website. You can check me out and see exactly you can find the same thing. They say like this: we have compiled a nearly exhaustive list with every divorce statistic, study, and fact that we could find. As we move into 2022, our San Diego divorce lawyer team has provided everything you need to know, and quite possibly more, all about divorce. Well, the results are eye-opening. And I'm going to share with you a few main facts, salient facts I found out there. Okay, we're talking about United States of America statistics, USA statistics, but I would guess they're pretty much the same in Western society, even though some countries are higher than others, but the West is much higher than the East, the Middle East, okay, in the Far East. The West is higher. The Japan, they have statistics like in the West, excuse me. Okay, but here's one eye opener. 1 of every 2 marriages in the United States ends up in divorce. Okay, person gets married. Okay, there's 50% chance that ultimately it's going to end up in divorce. Now, how does this break down? In first marriages, 41% end up in divorce. Okay, then most people that get married within 3 years get married again, and the second marriages, 60% end up in divorce. Now, once people they have their second divorce, it's already easy. You could change your partner like you can change your socks. Then you go into third marriage. But now third marriages, 73% end up in divorce. So between 2019 and 2021. Okay, and once again, over half of the marriages in the USA end up in divorce. When you collate the first marriage, the second marriage, third marriages, there's fourth and fifth, but we're not even going there. Okay, because that's less common. Okay, so these statistics, they show divorce rates. And even though we see that only 41% of first marriages end up in divorce, that doesn't mean that the other 59% are still married. It's days of wine and roses. Not necessarily. No, it doesn't mean that they're having a good time. Okay, why? How many people stay together because of financial convenience? They want to be on their own, and they're correct, because we'll see a later statistic. And unbelievable, I couldn't believe it when it did. 50% of the couples that get divorced, they lose 50% of their income. And these same 50%, many of them fall into poverty. It's crazy. Okay. And many people stay together, even though the examples that I see in my own personal experience, counseling people, people stay together. A lot of people stay together just because of the children. And I hear this from a lot of people. Say, Rabbi, were it not for the kids, I'd be down the road. And I hear this from husbands, hear this from wives. Okay, so a miserable marriage, that's tantamount to a miserable life, because nothing affects a person's capability of creativeness, of productiveness, of fulfilling personal potential than marital bliss. When I see a person, I remember when I used to be the head of a kollel before we started outreach all around the world, and I was the dean of a rabbinical kollel here in Ashdod, and I had 18 young men learning in this rabbinical seminary that I was the head of. And you could see in the morning when guys would come in, we'd see if a guy was really concentrating and learning really hard. This guy's got marital peace. He's got a good marriage. And see some guys that they're looking at their books and they're counting the flies on the wall. They're gazing up the sky. They're not focused. And you could know right away, recognize the young men that didn't have a good marriage. Okay, so we'll hold it. We're not finished. Wilkinson and Finkbeiner's team, they came up with some more enlightening statistics why they made people divorce. Listen to this. Number one, 73% divorce because of lack of commitment. Their lack commitment to each other and lack commitment to have a mutual commitment. Okay, commitment. Just where we have in the Hasidic world, where there is a commitment to the Creator, to one another, divorce is in our world. Divorce is somewhere between 12 and 15%, and it used to be 7%. It's up 5% because the influence of modern society, influence of chat rooms and stuff like that. But it's way, 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 way down because the different commitments are this. We don't have a cat, a dog, and 1.2 children. We've got lots of children. There's commitment to children, commitment to Hashem. We see there's a commitment to Hashem. And this is another one, if it's listening, not my words, but hear the words of Wilkinson and Finkbeiner, we'll see it later, that when a person amongst, even in America, amongst religious believers in God, amongst believers in God, there's 41% less divorce. Okay, so that if you take 50 times 4, that's you have 20% release instead with the believers in America. There's 30% divorce instead of 50% divorce. All right. So he says lack of commitment at 73% of the cause, and then there's also excessive arguing that happens in 55% of divorces. Infidelity, excuse me, heaven forbid, that's a transgression of Torah. Okay, thou shalt not commit adultery. Infidelity is found in 55% of marriages. I'm going to make something else, and we'll speak about this in our subsequent lessons. No holds barred at Bond of Emuna. We're not holding anything back, okay, and it's all straight. A mitzvah, a commandment of Torah, is on 3 levels. We learned 13 principles of Emuna. We learned divine direction, the 3 levels of the soul, the nefesh, ruach, and neshama, which corresponds to thought, speech, and deed. Our sages teach us that mitzvot are fulfilled on these 3 levels. You speak about a mitzvah by make a blessing, talk about it. There's some mitzvahs we use our speech. For example, the negative mitzvahs of slander, lashon hara, evil speech. Okay, and then there's thought, and then there's deed. Okay, so adultery is also on these 3 levels. Now, there could be adultery where maybe there's no physical contact, but the moment a person is speaking lewd to a person of the opposite sex, or a person is thinking about the opposite sex, that's tantamount to adultery in that level of the soul. Just in America, and I encountered a couple where the girl had contact with an old boyfriend. And I said, this is anathema, this can't be. And the husband was really upset about it. And they went to a secular psychologist, and the secular psychologist that married, the girl insisted. And he said, husband, why are you jealous? And we have to trust her. Come on, get out of here, man. You don't know what you know. Marriage is according to Torah. It's not according to your modern ABC, LGB, all your ideas. It's crazy ideas. No, a person is not allowed to have contact with an ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend, because the contact in speech, that constitutes adultery. That's adultery in speech, adultery of ruach. They're contaminating the middle section of the soul. Okay, but people don't understand. According to Torah, it's a no-brainer. According to a no-brainer, if this was in an Israeli religious court, the young lady would be thrown out, and she wouldn't have her rights, because this is something that cannot be done. Stuff is it's forbidden. So it's not according to Western nicety and political correctness. We go according to Hashem's law. We decide our life. What does Hashem want from us? And this is the way we make our decisions. Okay. A big thing, that a big reason that Wilkinson and Finkbeiner, they give for divorce is lack of preparation. Lack of preparation in 41% of the marriage. In other words, people getting married have no idea what marriage is all about. Okay, so let's add to the above facts. And here's another fact. This fact blew me off the court. It really did. Okay, that half, 1 out of 2, half of America's children grow up in single parent homes. Unbelievable. You know what it did? Divorce doing all these kids that they're like live orphans. They live, one parent is missing. And one parent, at least they know a parent that is not here anymore. They lost a parent. But it's like live orphans. And the tragedy is financial too, like we mentioned, because divorced families, they suffer 50% decrease in income. And a lot of them fall into the poverty threshold. So I could go on and on with these statistics. Just want to show you that Western society, non-Torah society, as far as the Institute of Marriage, guys, you're losing. You could read the sign, you're losing. Okay. And so we want to change all this. And one of the things I pray for that every person on earth should be happy. Every person should smile on their face and should love each other. It brings peace in the world. When there is no peace in the home, this spreads the community. There's no peace in the community. And no peace in the community. There's no peace in the state, no peace. And how can we expect peace between countries when there's no peace in the home? Because charity starts in the home. So Western concepts, where do people base their concepts on marriage? It's all romance and Hollywood concepts and love. They think it's infatuation. Infatuation is not love. Love is selflessness, and love is mutual commitment. Love is when you stick together under fire. As you see, this love is and anybody that's been in a war and been a combat unit, and you've got brothers in arms, that's love. That's love. Even maybe you couldn't stand the guy, but he goes under fire to pull you out from bullet spraying over your head. You love the guy. And we have people contacting with different sides of the fence, different sides of the religious fence, this side of political fence. It's a mutual commitment. Mutual commitment. This is it, marriage. Mutual commitment to one another, mutual commitment to Hashem and to His Torah. And that's the winning team. Okay, so why is it the winning team? That's the bond of Emuna. Now let's go back to what the Tzor Hamor told us. We said at the beginning of the lesson. Okay, King David said, all your mitzvot are Emunah. He says that in Psalm 119. And we cited at the beginning of the lesson that Rabbi Avram Saba said that the proper observance of Hashem's mitzvot, it depends on Emunah. So we established firmly that marriage is not only one mitzvah Torah, it constitutes several mitzvot of Torah, and the only way to properly fulfill it is by way of Emunah. Okay, so I'm amazed. Look what you're doing. It's you're winner or loser. And secular objective sources, even they validate Torah principles. And this law firm, it's not a Jewish law firm. It's a secular American law firm. But look what they say. Okay, if we recall the young man that asked Rabbi Ben Mustafi if he could move with his girlfriend, the rabbi answered with a really sharp and surgical no. He said, no way, can't do it. And he didn't even bother to delineate his answer. And okay, we itemize his answer and elaborate on his answer. But look what Wilkinson and Finkbeiner say. Okay, they say that if a couple lives together prior to marriage, they live together prior to marriage with everything that means, it increases the chance of subsequent divorce by 40%. In other words, if there's 50% chance of divorce and somebody lived with his boyfriend or with the girlfriend before getting married, now the chance of divorce is 70%. It's 40% higher. It's crazy. Okay, so 50% chance divorce now becomes a 70% chance divorce. It's like a 50% guy playing Russian roulette. The 50% chance of putting a bullet of divorce in one's head, it becomes a 70% chance. Whew. And again, that person that we take that away. And if a person has a belief in God, that knocks it down by the same 20%. So we see that genuine emuna, it brings the risk of divorce exponentially lower. So since marriage is a mitzvah, it can't be viable or lasting without emuna. And as we are going to learn throughout these series of lessons, this is going to take, I didn't anticipate any less than 10 lessons, maybe more, because we're going to go through finding a mate. We're going to go through criterion of finding a mate. We're going to go through a happy marriage, maintaining a happy marriage, etc. We're going to go turn no stone unturned, and until everybody has a happy marriage. Okay, we're going to learn that marriage, it's not a bond of two bodies. It's not like go into two animals out in the field. Marriage is a bond of two souls. In order to have a viable, lasting, loving marriage, you have to have a binding of the two souls. And Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai says that when in a marriage, the two souls come together, that they're actually two halves of one soul. Okay, so the requirement for a loving, lasting, and satisfying marriage is a bond of emuna, because the only way to bond two souls is by way of emuna. The only way to bind the soul to Hashem is by way of emuna. With a person with no emuna, can't cling to Hashem. So if that's the way the soul clings to its maker, and the soul is a tiny, tiny part of its maker, one soul clings to another soul by way of emuna. That's why our group here is so everybody loves each other and everybody's so cohesive, because we learn emuna together. We learn emuna together. We have a bond of emuna amongst us. It's a bond of a very good close. And I know when I go around the world, and right away when I see somebody from Moon Hour in a city, whether it's in Dallas or in New York or wherever we go in New Jersey, it's so happy. It's like a long lost best friend. And that's the bond that we have together. So many people, many people get married for the wrong reasons. But with Hashem's help, our lessons and the bond of Emuna and happy marriage are going to help us reshape our marriage for the right reasons.